Welcome to Detailed, an original podcast by ARCAT. This is a show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Cherise Lakeside, Senior Spec Writer for RDH Building Science and your host. My guest today is Amy Donohue, Principal at Bora Architecture Interiors in Portland, Oregon. Amy has over 25 years of experience designing spaces for education, collaborative work, and urban living. Her deep understanding of interdisciplinary environments has resulted in a sophisticated, award-winning body of work nationwide, while her advocacy to use architecture as a force for good drives her mission to diversify the profession and right social inequities. The project we are going to talk about today is the Oregon State University Learning Innovation Center in Corvallis, Oregon. Go Beavs! My kid went to school there. The 126,000 square foot OSU Learning Innovation Center, or LInC, completed in 2015, was envisioned as a new general purpose classroom building that would address the university's increased enrollment and boost graduation and retention rates. Upending traditional learning environments, the design championed active, engaged learning spaces, including an in-the-round, really cool, in-the-round lecture hall design inspired by Bora's deep performing arts portfolio that went on to serve as a prototype for classroom design nationwide. Now, let's get into the details. Amy, welcome to Detailed.
Thank you so much.
How are you today?
I am doing well. The sun is shining and it is a nice day here in Portland, Oregon. And I am sitting in our new office, which we moved into in February and have just been loving. So
I wasn't aware of that. Where's the new office at?
We are on the Central East Side. So we're just north of OMSI and in a big, the old Oregon Electric warehouse. So it's a big volume space, lots of wood and plants, and we have a big terrace, all the things that were more challenging to get downtown. So we're happy to be over here.
Oh, nice. I was not aware of that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'll have to. I was just on the east side for a CSI meeting last night and at Revolution Hall.
Oh, yes. We're not all that far.
Yes, see, I could have stopped in. I'll have to come check it out.
Next time, please do.
I will. So we always start the podcast with some random, and trust me, there's not a lot of intelligent thought put behind this, some random icebreaker question. Sometimes there's a reason behind it and it's related to the podcast. Sometimes there is not. Today is one of those days there is not. I just happened to think it was an interesting question. So your first question, just to kind of warm it up a little bit, is if you could add anybody you wanted to Mount Rushmore, who would it be and why?
Interesting. I mean, I would add my mom on there for sure. She just is someone who doesn't take no for an answer, makes everything happen, cares about everyone deeply, is part politician, part civic volunteer, part, she just makes everything work, from Christmas dinner to, new policies in her hometown that makes it a better place to live. So I would definitely put her up there.
I love that answer. She sounds like my kind of lady. Does it take no for an answer?
She does not take no for an answer. And she just is, in fact, I got a photo of her. She was volunteering every year she volunteers with Habitat for Humanity to build a house. And she was up on the second floor of a building on the top of a ladder. And, of course, my response in text was, get down from there right now. But she,
I saw that coming.
She sort of is fearless in every way. So yeah, she deserves a spot on that rock.
I love that. Well, I agree with that. And she'll have to listen to this and hear your answer because I'm sure she would be touched.
Yes, she will for sure. She and my dad are my, my greatest agents. So out there in the world.
We read your official bio already in our intro. So, briefly, tell me a little bit about you and where your passions lie in the industry and who is Amy?
Sure. Well, I come from a family of educators. So my parents, my siblings, I'm the oldest of four. I was the only one, the wayward child that did not go into the education business. So I do have a deep affinity and love for design for education. Because I feel that education can solve almost any of the world's ills, right? If you have a good education, you can bridge divides. You can learn how to do something new. We can solve all kinds of problems if we're educated. So providing greater access to education, thinking deeply about what those spaces are like. I think the community aspect of education spaces is very interesting to me. And of course, I love, 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 especially in higher education, to connect with faculty members who are teaching all these fascinating subjects. So it's just really interesting to get into the mind of a chemistry professor or a physics professor. Or right now I have a client who is a PhD in rhetoric, presidential rhetoric. And I really want to talk about the project. I actually just want to talk about her subject area. So, I really enjoy being part of the world of education through the lens of architecture and designing space. Outside of that, my husband, Paul McKean, is an architect as well. He does all residential. And we have two kids who have probably seen way too many tile showrooms in their lifetime. Sort of poor kids are stuck with two architects. But we love to travel, and I love to read and garden and do all kinds of things like that. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
But I love that. I think we have some things in common right
Yes.
out of the gate, besides the fact that one of the original founders of Bora, your firm, when he left the firm and started another firm and BSO became Bora, I worked at that firm for 22 years. I also have a very much an affinity for education. My son went to Oregon State.
Mm,
So my youngest son went to Oregon State. So I am particularly interested in this conversation. And I also agree with your mindset about education can fix the world's ills, coming from, to put it lightly, very humble beginnings. Um, that most people would have said that I would have been a statistic that wouldn't been able to
mm,
succeed because I was smart and had some amazing teachers that taught amazing things and saw that ability in me. I had a different life
right.
than the one my parents had, and so yeah, I think we're going to be good friends.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's talk about this project. So the
Yes.
OSU LInC. Can you start by explaining to our listeners what a Learning Innovation Center is? Because I'm
Hmm.
hearing this a lot lately from
Hmm.
different firms, and I'm like, I did that first firm for 22 years. We did all educational projects, by the way.
Ah,
So
okay.
my biggest bulk of experience is in school projects. What is a Learning Innovation Center as compared to just, your typical general classroom building?
Well, I think it's a good question. The Learning Innovation Center at OSU, I think, was the beginning of a trend, about a decade ago, where universities were starting to see uh, that it was hard to engage students. The economics of higher education is that you have to, especially in the undergraduate kind of freshman and sophomore courses, all those intro courses, you have to have large classes. You can't teach them to 50 kids at a time. And so all of a sudden a 600 person class becomes pretty common, but it's very, very difficult to teach that in a way that engages with the students. So what they did at OSU, what we did at OSU, and I think what other universities are also looking at doing is just making learning more active. And probably 20 years ago now, a classroom called the Scale Up Classroom, which was developed at NC State by a physics professor, really kicked the door open to active learning, I think, in a big way. So that was 72 seats, 8 tables of 9 students, and the teacher could gather them all together for one discussion or break them into groups of 9 or into groups of 3. And that was pretty radical. And I think that idea of active learning then has grown to other formats and configurations in classrooms, but also into different sizes. So the whole idea is just to really improve learning outcomes, get those younger students especially through those early days of their university time. And who knows, maybe Chem 101 will turn someone into a chemist if it's engaging enough instead of someone falling asleep at the back of the classroom. So not that chemistry isn't always interesting. I don't want to pick on chemistry, but
Well, I teach 24 weeks out of the year. I teach the CSI CDT certification program, project delivery education, specifications, contract documents, that kind of thing. And there's some pretty dry content.
pretty dry.
and
Right.
and it really is a game changer on how effective that teaching is. Is this talking head in front of the room? There's no personality. There's no interactive components to that. Then, basically all I'd be doing is putting everybody to sleep. So I can totally, I think our education system has needed something like that for a very long time. And I love to see that we're finally going there I learn better by being actively involved in something than I do. I'm famous for realizing I just didn't hear the last half hour.
Right.
Because my
And
mind won.
the room has so much to do with that. If you feel like you're in a conversation, you will pay attention and, you're ready for that next question. If you are just way out there in the back 9, there is no pressure to be on alert and engage at all. So
Right. Well, and we have more distractions now than ever before.
Yes, absolutely. No, I think a lot of the observation that we have done in classrooms that are more typical, we often call them the sage on stage, where the professor is way up at the front and the students are, 100 feet away from them. We definitely, when you get into the back rows and look behind those students, they're shopping on Amazon or playing some game online and it's not because they're not, these are very intelligent students, right? They deserve engaged learning. And I think universities are really moving. It was up to the departments for a long time to create their own active learning classrooms. And I think now universities are saying we need to do that in a much broader way across all of the departments and at much younger levels as students are coming into the university.
I'm thrilled to hear that. So, what was the driving need that led OSU to explore having this particular new building on campus? What's the background of that?
So it was two issues that were really involved in this. One was just a quantitative issue. I talked earlier about the economics of teaching at a large state university, and OSU has certainly seen a tremendous amount of growth over the last decade. And so to meet the challenges of educating those large classes coming in, they really needed more space. Their utilization for classrooms was 95%. They were teaching classes early in the morning and late at night, which again is not a recipe for student engagement. If you have calculus at 7:30 a.m., you might not do as well. I had calculus at 7:30 a.m. and I can tell you I didn't do as well. But so they needed more flexibility. I think when you're also at 95% utilization, it's challenging to add new coursework into the schedule. So they really wanted to have, they actually were looking to increase their general purpose classroom headcount by 25%. So they needed about 2,500 new general assignment seats. And so the registrar was really responsible for looking across the schedule and saying, okay, we need a 600 seat, a 400 seat, a 200 seat. He gave this whole spread of classrooms, and they really ranged from about 60 people to 600. And So that was on the quantitative side. I think the qualitative side, the vice provost for academic affairs, Rebecca Warner, uh, amazing thinker in terms of pedagogy and space. She said, you know what, that's fine. We can teach at those sizes and we can build those spaces, but they cannot look like what they look like today. We have to make something different so that our students have a more engaged experience. Because from her end, she was seeing graduation and retention rates, some, not significantly lower, but most definitely lower than what their peers in the university world were sort of seeing. So they were looking to these classrooms to really begin to boost retention rates for undergraduates, to boost overall graduation rates. The more engaged you can make learning in the beginning, the more successful the student will be as they move through their education. So it was really both of those. It was this quantitative need, we've got to have more seats and more space. And then it was also, but we also have to have just a better quality and engaged education for our students. And they really picked up that mantle. I mean, I have to say, OSU put their money behind their ideas. They really have invested heavily in this building, the Learning Innovation Center, are not only a whole host of new classrooms, but Rebecca Warner was able to get funding to create an instructional learning resource center, which is a faculty resource with professionals who, it's actually the Center for Teaching Excellence, professionals who help them to transition their coursework into these new spaces and to make the classes that much more engaging. So it wasn't just, here are all these new classrooms, we're going to toss you in and you can figure it out. They really backed it up with some additional training and support for the faculty as well.
I'd love to hear that. My son graduated, 5 years ago now?
Uh-huh.
And I remember every term scheduling, and he was, going after a bachelor's. As a matter of fact, he just last week got his master's degree from Northeastern. He lives in Boston now, but scheduling was just a nightmare, getting into the classes that he needed,
right,
for his degree when he needed them. And it's great to know that there's more space there now, and more room to breathe. That I know a lot of kids were struggling because they had that high utilization rate. There was a lot of competition for some of the classes, and that messes sometimes with people's schedules.
yes, and their ability to graduate, I mean, in a certain amount of time. So
right.
Absolutely.
And within a certain amount of money.
Yes, more importantly, yes.
Yes. Well, more importantly for
their parents, at least. Maybe.
For their parents. That was so much fun. In the white paper you sent, I was reading and trolling online a little bit, and I have your pictures open over here to my left. It really caught my eye when I read that traditionally classrooms have been modeled to deliver information, not exchange it. So maybe getting a little more technical, broadly tell me about some of the notable spaces, specific spaces in this building, and what makes them different.
Sure.
Than just besides the, kind of flexible seating arrangements you can do. What are some of the things you do to make it that more interactive environment?
Right. Well, configuration in the space has a lot to do with it, but technology is also certainly a big part of it. I think we always think of education as being about this exchange of information. In fact, we'll often show a photo of a campfire, sitting around a campfire, sharing stories, sharing knowledge. And then we if you look at classrooms, I mean, I was certainly educated in many classrooms where it was tablet armchairs that were fixed in rows that looked in one direction. I looked at the back of someone's head right in front of me, and then my teacher was way up at the wall with one whiteboard, or actually at the time it was a blackboard, but one writing surface up at the front and maybe a projector. But I was never in conversation with my classmates. There wasn't really space to break out and have small groups. And, I was a good student, so it worked. But I think there are a lot of kids who really were not successful in environments like that. So when we started the design of these larger classrooms, in particular the biggest ones, so OSU was looking for that 600 and 300. We first wanted to step outside of traditional academia. Sometimes the precedents can really limit you in terms of what you can imagine in the future. And so we started to look at different models like government models. There are certain parliamentary configurations where they really, the audience or the assembly members really wrap their way around the central dais. Or somebody, actually Adam Shalleck, who we work with all the time from the Shalleck Collaborative Theater Planner. We were in a room one day and he said, well, what about Phil Donahue's studio? Do you remember Phil Donohue? And he said, he was always in the middle and his audience was around him and he moved through the audience and asked questions. And so we drew this crazy diagram of a room in the round with the teacher in the middle and a whole series of screens out at the perimeter that people could see from any direction. And all of a sudden, being able to not only see your professor, because it actually took stage on stage, you're probably 18 in a 600 seat room. You're either in a balcony or you're about 18 to 20 rows back. In the round room, you're never more than 8 rows from your professor. So it sort of collapses people to the center. But it also, and maybe more importantly, meant that students saw each other. So across the way, through your professor, you could sort of see your colleagues in the class. And we've actually heard from a number of different faculty that as they're walking around, if someone behind them asks a question, a student on the other side will say, oh, there's a question over there. So everybody is engaging in different ways. So I think the round room probably in the most, and we have a round room at 600 and at 300, and they both feel incredibly intimate. But I think the round rooms are probably the most novel spaces that we have in here. And thankfully, the most oversubscribed. I think the faculty at OSU really love teaching in those spaces because they can get out into the audience and talk to their students. They can see each other. There's actually the study of proxemics says that if I'm within 15 feet of you, I'm in your zone. You cannot ignore me. So, if I'm 18 rows away from you, I can probably ignore you pretty easily. But if I'm the faculty member and I can kind of get out into that audience and get into your zone, you're going to pay attention. And it's sort of amazing. Faculty really take advantage of that. There's actually Erica Wokel, who is a professor of kinesiology at OSU, trained as a dancer. She will make a full figure 8 loop all the way around that room. She moves constantly. And I think that activity keeps students engaged as well. So
it does. I'm looking at the picture of the largest space right now, and I'm laughing at myself a little bit because I looked in not super detail because I like to kind of look at them more closely as you're talking about them and kind of relate that. But when I glanced at this picture before this podcast, I did not know that was a classroom. I thought it was like a smaller, like somewhat performance space or something like that. And I'm going, okay, I want to go back to school.
Right.
And I want to be in that classroom with all the screens all around. And I think it's fabulous. I could totally see how this environment, looking at this picture, would be so much more engaging than the standard lecture hall or huge, I mean, this could even be more engaging than a smaller class, just by the way that people are situated. I did not realize this was a classroom, so yes. I feel a little stupid right now. I just thought it was, a special space in the building.
No, I love that you say that though, because I will say that there have been other uses that the university has found for the space. There's an opera program that staged a performance in the round, which is fantastic. I mean, nobody ever contemplated that function, but the space is it's so novel that I think they sort of tailored their performance to it. The other thing that happens is that students bring their parents on Parents Weekend. They bring their parents to see these classrooms. And that is not something, I mean, when you think about Parents Weekend, you're thinking, oh, you go see the Student Union and you see the stadium and you go to the quad and maybe the library. But rarely, I think, do students take their parents to go see a classroom. So this is a real stop on the tour now. And actually, the best story is there was, I don't think the university was super excited about this, but on a Sunday night, there was a group of students who somehow got into the room and got into the AV system and had a crazy raging party in that room. And Monday morning, I don't think it was very pretty, but how awesome that you want to, like you're in a classroom on a Sunday night and it's a room that you think is worthy to, hang out in, to socialize in, to sort of do that. So,
Well,
so
you
we
know
were
that.
we were pretty happy about that. But
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Oregon State was
yeah,
not.
maintenance was probably not happy about
No,
that. But
but young people. I raised 4 kids. They're not going to give the time of day to something that they don't care about. At
right.
at the end of the day, or I could, watching my youngest path through college at Oregon State, he would have loved this. He's a high achiever and does really well in school. He would have loved an environment, and those screens. I mean, we do need to move out of the mindset of old. We're in this world of technology.
Right.
There's so many different ways you could use that to make your level of education even more multifaceted.
Yes.
But I love it. I just cannot get over that's a classroom. I keep looking at it going, no, how did I mean, I see it now, but it's great. Let's get into some more technical detail about the design. Let's start with the exterior.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit. I have that picture open as well, about your design intent here and what you did to make this a good, tight, energy efficient enclosure.
Yes. So the overall design intent, because we had a very, very innovative modern interior, right? These classrooms that had never been done before. But the OSU campus itself is an historic district, the whole part of it, and it is regulated by the Historic Review Commission and the Department of Interior. And it's an historic campus, and they really want to preserve the feeling and the texture and the colors and things like that on campus. So it is brick, it's red brick. We tried to make it a very simple, almost like a veil or a cover that would kind of slid over all these different forms that were on the interior, with a very regular pattern of fenestration windows, and tried to do some undulation within the facade to make smaller spaces on the inside where you could peel off 2 by 2 or on your own, and you could have a small writing space or a little nook of informal space, or a whole host of different activities, but to make spaces that were just a little bit scaled down from this big circulation loop, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit later on the interior. So it's a rain screen system, pretty robust. We're very, very, we always do the blower door tests. We're sort of very, very consistent in trying to make sure that there's very low infiltration, and just a really, really, we invest a lot, I would say, in the envelope. In this one, we have actuated windows, so we do some night flushing. From a texture standpoint, we have a whole series of ridges on the exterior that really, more from a kind of a visual standpoint, play out the density of people in the building as it dissipates toward the top. So it's a pretty robust, I think, both visually as well as the actual sort of assembly of that. It's all tube steel sort of behind it, so it has a great deal of structural girth, but it's not going anywhere. I think the permanence that OSU wants their buildings to convey is certainly there. And from an energy standpoint, the quality of the wall and the envelope is such that it serves them pretty well. And we'll talk a little bit later too about, because the thermal comfort range and the circulation and the classrooms all have a unique relationship in this building that also factored in.
Well, I'm looking. I know that, just having worked on schools for years myself, when you have an owner who's going to live in that building,
Yes.
which is not the case always. If maybe it's a mixed use multifamily kind of thing where they're building it to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
But especially schools, they are more concerned about how durable are the products going in this building, how energy efficient is my building going to be because I have to
Yes.
pay these bills.
Right.
And it gives you the opportunity also to do those things that you might not always get to do on every type of project.
Right. Right.
And
Absolutely.
it's just smart business. That I have to say, I love the teaching stare
Mm.
that appears to, it jumped out of the picture at me
Oh.
because I went and trolled a bunch of other things outside of what you sent me. So this teaching stair that appears to just kind of float over the floor below with these, if I remember right, with some glass walls. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like hanging over the precipice. Um, just got me to thinking about, I have less pictures of the interior of this building.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Tell me about that stair and tell me about some of the things you did with the interiors and the finishes that you used and some of the way that you designed that flow and circulation and different things in the interior of the building.
Absolutely. Well, if we start with the classrooms, each classroom was really assigned a color. So, we did hear often like, well, sometimes furniture will migrate between rooms and you end up with, 65 seats in one room and 55 seats in another. And so we assigned every room a color. So the furniture was upholstered in that color. The exterior doors were painted that color. We had an image that we borrowed a whole series of really beautiful images from the various colleges and subject areas that are taught at the university and abstracted those at the entries of each classroom. So color was definitely something that we were trying to use to both to organize but also to attract people to that. The circulation in the building is, first, the color was used again for the big stairs that traverse floors because the volume of these rooms, when you have 600 people or 300 people in a room, acoustically, you really need a high floor to floor so that you can have the right acoustic environment for people to be able to talk and that speech intelligibility is really good. So we had some pretty epic stairs and we wondered, would students climb 30 feet to the second floor and then another 24 feet to the third floor on a stair, or would we have a pile up at the elevator? And to make the stairs as attractive as we could, first we made them very, very wide, given the number of people that were going to be coming and going in pretty compressed amounts of time. But we also made them these shocking, intense colors. So just trying to attract people to take the stair. From what I understand too, the track team I think now they train on those stairs on occasions. They'll sort of do the runs of stairs. But the stair that you are referring to was part of a whole wrapper of informal space that we placed around the classrooms, which actually was just as important as the formal learning classrooms themselves to OSU. They really wanted more spaces like that for students to be able to land in as individuals in small groups. But in this case, for the floating stair, they wanted a space where students could give perhaps less formal presentations, or the honors college is in this building and at the end of their undergraduate degrees they have to give a thesis presentation, and so they thought of it as a place of even practicing your thesis presentation in front of a more public audience. So I think students hang out there. I know there's one biology professor who takes her 600, she leaves her class in the round, 600 students, and she says, I'm headed up to the stair. If anybody has any questions, follow me. And it's a less formal way to talk about some of the content in the class. So it's a space that can be used informally, but you can also, gather around and use it in a slightly more formal way as well. So yeah, that loop actually that was a breakthrough, I would say, in a lot of different ways for the project. The classrooms themselves, when you have a round classroom, you you don't want to, circles are hard because if you don't make them symmetrical, you bias the room, right? So if only one side has daylight, then everybody in the room is going to turn and track that way. Maybe the professor is going to sort of end up focusing mostly on that part of the audience. So we tried to make all of these rooms symmetrical, which meant having 4 exits out of each room on each floor. And so the idea that you weren't just coming out of the room in one direction into the circulation, but you were really moving out in all directions. So we wrapped the classrooms with a blanket, as we call it, of informal space. So you could leave in any direction and land in a smaller space where you could continue the conversation in class. And the beauty of the diagram was that it actually, because we'd wrapped the classrooms in this blanket, literally, we could eliminate heating from the classrooms because they never touched the exterior. They had a blanket of air around them. So we were able to eliminate an entire system from the building. And then the loop itself, which is all informal space and not scheduled, OSU was willing to move in the direction of an expanded thermal comfort range. So they added, 2 to 3 degrees onto the lower threshold and 2 or 3 degrees higher. So all of a sudden, the energy used to cool and heat those spaces was greatly reduced. And their idea was, the whole idea was that if you're on the south side and it's hot, you're not scheduled to be in this informal space, go to the north side. And there are about 640 informal seats that are in the building. So a good number of people can be in the building in addition to the 2,500 classroom seats. So it was part mechanical solution, part just managing this flow of thousands of people in a class change, and part creating informal space that this all came to be.
And ended up benefiting that just in things like energy use in the long run. I love that. I don't know that I ever would have thought about that being a blanket around. I'm thinking round rooms like that had to be fun.
Yeah.
That just had to be fun to figure out, like how we're doing all of this and how are people going to move. But that teaching stair just, I was just like, I want to just go sit there and just hang out there all day and hang out. I'd love to people watch. What a perfect spot to do that.
Yes, because you can get views, on the same floor and sort of down into that lower space too. We gave them some projection capability that comes out of the soffit kind of across the way and the slab opening. And so technically you could have a group downstairs and a group on the seating stair watching the same. I don't know how often they do that, just given how busy the space is, but it's designed to be able to do that.
Can you describe for me one notable design challenge you faced on this project and how you solved it? Teach our listeners something.
Sure. So I mentioned earlier about the 600 seats, and typically in a Sage on Stage, you have a balcony. So you have a main floor that's down at the level with stage, and then you have more seats up above. And that is not only expensive to build, but very challenging to adapt. Because once you have poured that giant concrete balcony up above what we would call in a performance space, the orchestra level, you're not really going to do anything else to it in the future other than spend a lot of money to demolish it. So for these 600 seat rooms, partially because we wanted it to be flexible for the long term, but also, OSU was really brave to do these rooms, and they believed deeply in the concept. And we did full scale mock-ups so that the faculty could try it. And we did all kinds of things to really make sure that this was the room that they needed. But they also knew in 10 or 15 or 20 plus years, maybe this room wasn't going to be what they needed. And so another benefit of collapsing the audience around the instructor is that we could do very, very low slope floors that had, we sort of built up risers where we were able to distribute the air under floor, kind of under the seats, just based on the volume in the room. But what that also does is in the future, you can come in and pretty easily, probably over a summer, make that room flat floor and, bifurcate it in any number of different ways. It could be 4 100 seat classrooms. It could be 6, you name it, you could divide it in different ways. But I think just the idea that future proofing a little bit, both in terms because we know pedagogy will change, but also it was a little bit of insurance for OSU that, if this, for all of its best intentions, if this doesn't work out, we have a backup plan. So I think trying to making that architecture much more flexible and not investing in lots of heavy concrete, which for many reasons is a good idea. I think that was really, really helpful in the long run.
Well, and one of the lessons I'd take away from that is when you want to try something different, that might be the best thing since sliced bread, but you don't know until you try it.
Right.
Um, what a great way to work that out with the client. Okay, we'll try it, but we're going to make this in a way that you can put it back to something else if over the long term it doesn't work the way you're hoping it will. Now, it sounds like the teachers are fighting over this space, so I think you're good.
Yes.
But that's a great way to also know you have flexibility going forward, which I think, especially in education facilities at any level, is
Right.
critically important.
Yes, because it is the public's investment, I mean, K through 12, there are bonds, and university funding, it's bonds or private money. And it is the university's, it's a big investment for all of us. And so to be able to future-proof it like that, I think is really important. I mean, there's a reason why there are a bazillion Sage on Stage rooms out there, because they know that it works. It's serviceable, as my husband would say, right? Those rooms sort of get the job done. So to do something new with the university's investment, I think, is a big deal. And OSU was really brave to do that. And in addition to the Instructional Learning Resource Center, which they put in to support the faculty, they also gave money right after the project was completed to start a longitudinal research project with their College of Education, Center for Teaching and Learning, the whole group of kind of teaching professionals to research these rooms, like why, what is different about the outcomes in a 600 arena versus Milam Auditorium, which is their 600 seat, more typical room on campus. And what they found was that it actually is working. Their failure and withdrawal rates in classes taught in the arena have dropped 30% from classes that are taught in Milam Auditorium. So think about that. In 600 seats, you have, if previously you had 12% of those students who failed, now you only have 8% of those students who failed. So that's a real number of students who continue to move forward in that subject area, in their education. They get credits completed, all kinds of things like that. So I think the university is finding that it most definitely is working, and other universities have taken note too. Texas A&M now has a building that's very similar. The University of Michigan has built one of these rooms. UC Riverside just opened one. So it's the results are feeding into, I think, more versions of this room happening around the country.
I loved that you said that, the stage on stage it works. I mean,
Right.
it serves its purpose. But I remember my son was a microbiology major, and he had some classes that, like, they're only taught one term a year.
Right.
And they're only taught once, like OChem. He loved that class. And it was in a room like that, a huge number of students looking at a stage. And I, before you qualified, when you said it works, I'm like, but does it? Mm-hmm. In today's day and age, with all the distractions and the phones and all the different things, and so easy to be so far away, and like you said, be shopping on Amazon. And then you mentioned the numbers that have improved, which I expected it to be notable. I didn't expect that kind of increase. I didn't know what to expect, but I am so grateful, especially since I have a fondness for Oregon State, that they chose to take that chance. Mm-hmm. Because, like you said, it's now bleeding to other places, and it's working, and that's benefiting everybody involved in the long run.
Absolutely.
And I've never been good with that whole stage on stage environment as far as learning goes, and so you got to be pretty proud of that.
Yes, I think, really proud of it. And proud not only because of the results, but also the process. The faculty were big time co-creators of this whole new room. When we began the process, we were hosting these pedagogy charrettes, and we asked them, okay, let's not think about what the room looks like, but what's the relationship that you want to have with your students in this class? And it was really their sense of being connected, making eye contact, being able to get out into the middle that drove these classrooms, these ideas. And then all of the full scale mock-ups that we did. We actually took Memorial Union Ballroom, and John Dorbolo, who's the director of technology across the curriculum, really fantastic, incredible activator for this project. He laid out all these tables and chairs that would be in the round, and he put a podium in the middle, and he had the instructors come and give these micro lectures. And people who had been really skeptical of the idea all of a sudden were hooked. They could see the power of it. But we checked in with the faculty often to as the rooms advanced in design. And I have to say, every time we would be getting off of I-5 and getting off at the OSU exit, I think to myself, okay, today's the day. Like the room's going to die. There's no way this can keep going. And OSU is I think they're really out there. They were willing to take a chance, and with the right research and testing, again, that engineering mentality, like they went for it. And I think they have shown some tremendous leadership in the world of higher education because of it. So we love
Well, I
we
mean,
love
yeah,
working with OSU. Yeah, we love
they're
OSU.
they're kind of known for that. I mean, they've got all kinds of federal offices on campus. I mean, they're
Right.
doing all kinds of. My son worked in the labs, was one of his
Mm,
side jobs for a couple of years. All kinds of innovative things going on there, in doing things before anybody else.
yeah.
So yeah, it just makes me love the school even more. My niece is now going to school there, so
Oh, great. Well,
we had a little party when she decided that she was going to go there.
nice. Well, ask her. She might be taking classes in this building if she's
I,
just starting up. I'm sure she is.
I definitely will. Um, with were you pursuing any particular sustainability goals for this project, or I'm hearing more and more answers saying no, but we were doing sustainable things. We didn't necessarily go after the lead gold or whatever.
Same here. Same here. I think on an equivalent basis, it would have at least been lead gold, but the university was not interested in certifying or tracking in that way. So, we did try to bake things into the design in terms of reducing energy, like reducing and eliminating the heating system and having actuators on the windows. So we would do a night flush, the expanded thermal comfort range, nice tight envelope. Healthy materials is something that we are very serious about here at Bora. The joke is, can you eat it? I mean, not everything, but you know what I mean? Like, how healthy is this material? Just really reducing any sort of off gassing, or, that you walk in and it's a healthy building to support learning. So, yeah.
I'm going to steal that
Can you eat it?
on the podcast. I'm going to steal that when I'm asking about sustainable materials. I'm going to ask them, "Can you eat it?" So you're going to hear that regularly going forward because I love that.
Uh,
Um, I know I'm running short on time, so I'm going to try to squeeze these in, but I have to ask this one. I feel like some of your best lessons learned as a design professional are during construction,
mhm,
because this is where you're finding out whether what you've designed can really come together and be built the way that you envision it.
right.
Were there any surprises or lessons that you learned from this building during construction?
Yes, I'd say a couple. One, the screen that wraps around that continuous screen in the 600 seat room. We actually, a young architect here had found this really interesting company in upstate New York that made a stretchable fabric that could stretch over a frame in multiple directions. And we did a small mock-up, and it looked like it was going to work. So we bid the documents that way, and we moved it to construction. And then we started to install it in its full scale application, and we were getting puckers. So it wasn't working. So we had to pivot and go to a framed gypboard wall with, I don't know if this is a technical term, but this is what Ian, our at the Charlotte Collaborative, always called it's this goo paint, and it is a more reflective paint that enables a hard surface to be a projection screen. So that is the final. That's what the final is. It's actually a hard wall, metal stud framed wall with chipboard and goo. But it works. But I think, sometimes I would say that probably that would have been a tried and true response. But we were a bit in the mode of everything is new in this space and we are going to just push the envelope. And I think the fabric pushed it a little too far. So that was a change in construction. The other thing that I just found fascinating, because I hadn't necessarily worked on a site like this, but this portion of OSU's campus has liquefiable soils. So this building actually sits on 600 stone columns that are built to stabilize the building in a seismic event. When the liquefiable soil, that it sort of just rushes out from underneath the building. So to stabilize it, we spent a lot of money and many months. Fortis Construction did a great job on this project, but they installed 600 of these stone columns under the building, which is kind of hard to imagine.
It
So
is.
yeah, so that was just more of we knew we had to do that, although you never really know until you get down there how many I think you have to do. But that was just an interesting thing for me. That was the first time I had experienced, I had to do anything like that on a project. So
it's the first time I've heard of anything at that scale. I've heard of over the years some form of that kind of thing.
mm-hmm.
A little bit going on underground
Mm-hmm.
to stabilize something, especially in high water tables. But
Right.
you said 600, and I'm like, they did
600.
What?
No, it doesn't even. It doesn't even think that it doesn't feel like you could fit 600 into the footprint of this building, although it is almost a football field, at least in length. But it is quite the project underground there.
So what's next for Bora? What are you working on now? What do I get to call you back about later and say,
Yeah.
okay, Amy, you need to come back and talk to me?
So we are working on a project at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It's actually a project for the humanities, which I would say in higher education right now is pretty unusual. We see a lot of STEM buildings, we see a lot of general purpose classrooms, but this is a real beacon for the humanities. They are taking their Department of History, which is a very storied department, I think, in the US, like very, very well known, and they're combining the Department of History with all of the ethnic studies departments from across the campus, who right now are in very, very marginalized space. And this is putting them front and center, gateway building, really making, I think, those subjects and the discussion of those areas front and center for the university. And then they are putting general purpose classroom seats into the building so they can also welcome and expose other students who might not be in those majors to the important conversations and scholarship that is going on there. So that's been really exciting for us, I think, because of who's in the building. I think it's been very exciting. It's an urban building. We land right on the corner of a very, very busy intersection in Madison, and that has been a lot of fun. So, and just a great, great client, great group of people. Again, such a fun part of what we do is meeting faculty all over the country. So we're doing that. I'm not working on it, but colleagues of mine are doing the new Jefferson High School, which is going to be a mass timber structure in addition to the existing. And I think it's just going to be a really incredible project for all the students that will be there and for that community. We're doing a new high school for Rosemary Anderson High School in East County, which I think will be really interesting. And then we're flying all over the place talking to people about doing other projects too. So, but these are, just a lot of education projects in the pipeline, kind of certainly our favorite.
Well,
So.
you have a very long and storied history of working on education. My old firm, there were like 2 or 3 firms that were on the short list for every school. I was there for 22 years, and it was our firm, Bora,
Right.
And Dowa,
Yes,
which
right.
is now a different firm, but
Right.
like every time we all knew one of us was going to get it. We just didn't know which firm's getting this one or who's got the better
Right.
relationship with this client.
Hmm.
Well, that's amazing, and I love to see that Bora's continuing. Um, Bora has never had anything but a stellar reputation, both in the work that they do and their business practices, and so I love to see that that's obviously continuing because I get to meet you and you're an amazing person, and amazing firms don't come from people who are not amazing
Well,
at the end
thank
of the
you.
day.
I mean, I stand on the shoulders of giants, you know. I mean, I'm third generation leadership here, and certainly, you know, Chuck and Bud and Heinz and all of the originals are, you know, retired, and even second generation is now retiring or retired. I think half of them live in Italy at this point. But third generation feels really good. But we do, you know, we're certainly taking the firm in a new direction, but we appreciate and honor, I think, the work that we've done in the past by continuing to focus on education and the arts and, you know, projects that are really meaningful to the community.
Well, definitely congrats to you because I think that's it. You can't live in the past, but you can't leave the past behind either
Right,
because
right.
that's what got you where you are right now.
Exactly,
And there are
exactly.
lessons that can go forward from that.
Right.
I like to close out. There's two final questions, usually a broad industry question, and then my final everybody gets. Your bio mentioned your advocacy to use architecture as a force for good, which
Hmm.
drives your mission to diversify the profession and right social inequities.
Yes.
So tell me, your personal opinion, what could we be doing better in architecture to be more socially equitable in the design of our buildings?
So I think we could be working with our users and our community voices much more than we do today and listening to them in a genuine way where the approach is more of a co-creation. You know, I have a lived experience that is my own expertise, but someone of a different demographic or a different race or a different gender or a different education background has a totally different lived experience. And, you know, we just finished a project for Portland Community College. It's their
Mhm.
Opportunity Workforce Training Center. And many of the people who go to this building are on TANF benefits. So they are coming to this building to get training, to move into jobs and really sort of stabilize their family life. Sometimes that doesn't always happen and they lose benefits. So the staff and the clients that are going to this building are traumatized in many ways because there are some really tough things happening in their life. And so we met with the community and with those clients and staff, not just at the beginning of the project, but what we always say is we kind of wrap that engagement all the way around the project so that as we get to new levels of detail and have new questions, we can constantly be having that design conversation that isn't an echo chamber between the architects, engineers, and design facilities and construction staff on campus. And PCC has been amazing in pushing that kind of engagement. And the building now, I think, is just a really welcoming and place where you can come and take a breath and move into the building. And it's not a mean, punishing space that you feel like you're just a number. It really, and all much of that grew out of this sense of design justice, which is what we refer to it as, which is this process of really putting stock and value into that lived experience and thinking about design as addressing, many of those issues and not assuming. I think for a long time, architects assumed that, well, we have nothing to do with making space inclusive or exclusive. We just design it and then, it takes care of itself. And I think that's not true. When you listen to communities of color in particular, the way that they experience space is very different. And as designers, we can address some of that and make people feel much more welcome and in a sense and more engaged. I mean, getting back to the sort of the engaged learning, right? It's not even just in learning spaces, but so that I think architecture could step outside of feeling like it always has all the best ideas and instead really sort of turn that creativity to translating, some ideas that others at the table have, and expanding the voices that are at the table as well. So
That's fantastic. I mean, and I hope all of you listeners really paid attention to that last question, because I agree with you wholeheartedly. Different people from wherever they're coming from experience a space in different ways. And at the end of the day, architects do amazing things, but they're not the ones living and breathing and working in that building.
right.
And, just trying to take yourself out of your own shoes for a minute, get some input, and then try to walk in those shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Is this what I thought they needed, really what they need?
Right.
And that level of engagement hasn't historically been anywhere near as high as I think it should be in every building we do.
Right.
So I'm glad I spotted that in the things that I read, and I'm glad we talked about it. Final question. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
gets this one. No getting out of it. Sorry. We some people have said, like, I don't like world domination. I said, oh God, don't take it so personally. We all hope that our involvement in this life, I know I do, will in some way make the world a better place
Mm-hmm.
or make a difference for somebody. For me, I call that mission, my personal world domination statement. How am I going to dominate my world to be the best person I can be?
Mm-hmm.
Personal or professional? How do you as an individual hope to make your mark on this world or make a difference for those around you? What is your personal world domination statement?
So I think it would go back to changing the profession to think more about approaching projects through the lens of design justice, like really to accept our responsibility to be a force for good. I mean, I have to say, I think we do not have a lot of people of color in our industry because architecture has not historically been a force for good in communities of color, right? So why would someone become an architect if it, doctors are a force for good, teachers are a force for good, right? Those are I would want to be that if I grew up in a community like that. But architecture hasn't always been positive. It's been sort of, black cape, very ego driven. My architectural agenda is going to get laid on this site and you're going to love it. I worked for an architect like that when I first got out of school, and it was beautiful buildings, but as objects, not as places that humans really thrive. So I think I would love to leave my mark on this profession and really shake up the thought that we have all the creative capital, that just being more open, and truly it comes down to being more creative. If you're creative, you can listen to all these different ideas and lived experiences and come up with something that not even you ever imagined. So
Well, I am pretty sure that you've already made huge inroads into that world domination statement, and amen. I'm excited to watch all the things you do next, because you now have a total supporter and cheerleader in your efforts. Amy, thank you so much
thank
for
you.
taking time out of your busy day to join me today. I know you've had a lot of big stuff going on lately, and I appreciate your time and respect everything you're doing. And I'm so thrilled to hear Bora's still the amazing firm they always have been.
Well,
And I hope you'll come back and talk to me again about another project.
I would love to. And I really appreciate the invitation today and the opportunity to talk about this project and many other things. So it's good to connect with you finally. And thanks again for having me.
Thank you.